Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to Bhagavad Gita Reading Live, featuring my new Gita. Man, this thing is huge. This is my new home Gita. Not good for preaching. I wouldn't want to hand this out on the streets, but man, oh man, this thing is great to read from. Nice and big text. I got this for free for doing some service for the warehouse where it's from. Anyway, all glories to KBI. And the original BBT, especially, all glories to that too. Let's start with some invocation. And I lost my place. Okay. Om Gyanaatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Okay, I've almost got it memorized. All right, we are continuing where we left off, which was 330. Or page 196 in the original edition. All right, here it is, 330. Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me with mind intent on me and without desire for gain and free from egoism and lethargy, fight. I was just going to say exactly what Prabhupada says in the purport here. This verse clearly indicates the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. This is why Krishna is singing his song. The historical purpose, that is to convince Arjuna to fight. That's what this is all about. It's Krishna doing whatever he can using poetic language, philosophical language, authoritative language, whatever he can, so that in the end Arjuna will say, okay, you know what? You're right. I'm going to fight. Even though I don't feel like it or I don't want to, I'm going to do it just because it's right to do it. This is also the song of ethics, actually. I think it's kind of the same thing. Excellence is the goal in itself. That's what ethos is. Okay, keyword here. Without desire for gain and free from egoism. And lethargy. Oh man, this verse really speaks to me. I've gotten good at reducing my desire for gain and kind of egoism too, but lethargy is just killing me these days for a long time. Looking at the word for word here. Oh, the word sannyas is in here for giving up completely these karmani, these activities. Interesting. Oh, wow. Sanskrit is such a beautiful language. So nirasi is without desire for profit. Nirmama is without ownership. Bhutva, so being. Fight. Vigata Jivara, without lethargic. Without being lethargic. Yeah, I was trying to figure out which one means lethargy. No way I'm going to remember that word. It's too long. Interesting note, though, is adhyatma means with full knowledge of the self. So atma, you can clearly see an adhyatma, and adi, I think it's a little different than the adi that means original, but a little different but sounding very similar is not an accident. Not in Sanskrit, not in many other languages. 331. One who executes his duties according to my injunctions and who follows this teaching faithfully, without envy, becomes free from the bondage of fruitive actions. Okay, this one is even more strong. I think what Krishna did here is he summarized the previous things there, which was without desire for gain, egoism, or lethargy. He summarized all three of those to without envy. I know envy is a little different, but instead of giving three reasons to follow his instruction, he gave just one. Not reasons, but conditions. Um, so in 330, he says, okay, you can do this karma yoga so long as you don't do these three things, it'll work. But now he's saying, look, just follow this faithfully without doing this one thing, envy, and then you'll at least become free from the bondage of karma. Actually, for this online reading, this Gita is not quite as good because it's too big. But maybe if I move my computer up more. Yeah, okay, now I have some desk space. That's all I needed. Okay. Short purport there. We'll keep going. 332. But those who, out of envy, disregard these teachings and do not practice them regularly are to be considered bereft of all knowledge, befooled, and doomed to ignorance and bondage. I think Krishna's being nice here. I think it's worse than that. Like it's one thing to not follow these instructions, but to do that out of envy, oh man, that's a really low place to be. I hope no one listening here is on that level. Oh, actually, now that I think about it, I am there myself sometimes. Humility ki jai. I've noticed that anyone who's in a spiritual position of authority, any guru, God himself, and all these great personalities, I have this like initial reaction sometimes that's just kind of like, oh, what do you know? This sort of thing. Fortunately, that initial reaction is tamed very quickly within the next moment or half second or so. But this is one way you can test or observe your own purity or lack thereof, is what kind of knee-jerk reactions do you have to certain stimuli. That first initial reaction that you don't really have conscious control over, that's coming from character. That's really showing you where you're at. If I give you 10 years to write me a 500 word essay, you can make a really good essay, even if you don't even speak the language. You can learn the whole language itself. You can study to get a PhD. You can do so many things in those 10 years to make that one little essay just a piece of cake, even if it's a total masterpiece. But if I give you 1 nanosecond to do something, there's no way you can do it. The only way you can follow that instruction is to just act naturally in that 1 nanosecond. Whatever happens, happens. And this is exactly what happens every single moment. So we got to pay attention. 333. Even a man of knowledge who acts according to his own nature, for everyone follows his nature. What can repression accomplish? What is he talking about with repression there? I'm going to read the word for word before we get into the purport. Accordingly, tries in one's own nature, modes, the learned, although nature undergo all living entities suppression. What can do? Kim Karishyati. What can you do? Kim Karishyati. Okay, Prabhupada's purport. Unless one is situated on the transcendental platform of Krishna consciousness, he cannot get free from the influence of the modes of material nature, as is confirmed in 714. Therefore, even for the most highly educated person on the mundane plane, it is impossible to get out of the entanglement of Maya simply by theoretical knowledge or by separating the soul from the body. There are many so called spiritualists who outwardly pose to be advanced in the science, but inwardly or privately are completely under the particular modes of nature which they are unable to surpass. That could be what Krishna is talking about with repression. Someone who's doing false renunciation. They're making a show of how renounced they are, but on the inside, they haven't renounced at all. Academically, one may be very learned, but because of his long association with material nature, he is in bondage. Krishna consciousness helps one to get out of the material entanglement, even though one may be engaged in his prescribed duties. Therefore, without being fully in Krishna consciousness, no one should suddenly give up his prescribed duties and become a so called yogi or transcendentalist artificially. It is better to be situated in one's position and to try to attain Krishna consciousness under superior training. Thus, one may be freed from the clutches of Maya. All right, I'm just going to read the next verse. I may come back again. 334. Attraction and repulsion for sense objects are felt by embodied beings. But one should not fall under the control of the senses and sense objects because they are stumbling blocks on the path of self realization. Very direct and indirect at the same time. What Krishna is obviously hinting at is how the being attracted or repulsed, that push pull dynamic, that's how you become under the control of the senses. Whereas when you're not attracted or repulsed, when you're detached and responding equally or equanimously, then you get to control these things. You can choose what your senses do or not do. You're in control. But if there's push and pull forces going on, that inertia is controlling you. That's the modes and not you. Next verse is one of my all-time favorites, but I'm going to add this one too, even though it's kind of obvious. Senses controlled by push-pull. This is just how I summarize it to myself in 4 words in English. Yeah, I think Prabhupada nailed it with the last verse. Suppression is referring to those who choose not to act according to their own nature in terms of some lofty goal that they're not really ready to do. It's a really awkward transition from 332 to 333, and then 334 is just another thing entirely. So I'm really stunned by that verse. Good purport here on 334, although it is, to be honest, a little obvious. So we are going to go right ahead. How long have I been talking here? 16 minutes? Yeah, maybe we'll finish after this. I don't know. This is too important. I'm going to read it anyway. 334 purport. Those who are in Krishna consciousness are naturally reluctant to engage in material sense gratifications, but those who are not in such consciousness should follow the rules and regulations of the revealed scriptures. Unrestricted sense enjoyment is the cause of material entanglement, but one who follows the rules and regs of the revealed scriptures does not become entangled by the sense objects. For example, sex enjoyment is a necessity for the conditioned soul, and sex enjoyment is allowed under the license of marriage ties. For example, according to scriptural injunctions, one is forbidden to engage in sex relationships with any woman other than one's wife. Too late for me and most other my age. I mean, I've never been married, but so I should be a virgin. But I'm not. Many of us are not. And honestly, that's too bad. I mean, I kind of wish I was a virgin. Kind of wish I never saw porn, never been with a girl, a woman, complete virgin. Yeah, I mean, it'd be in a totally different situation, but I can see how it's a lot better spiritually. All other women are to be considered as one's mother, but in spite of such injunctions, a man is still inclined to have sex relationships with other women. These propensities are to be curbed. Otherwise, they will be stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. As long as the material body is there, the necessities of the material body are allowed, but under rules and regulations. And yet, we should not rely upon the control of such allowances. One has to follow those rules and regulations, unattached to them, because practice of sense grat under regulations may also lead one to go astray, as much as there is always the chance of an accident, even on the royal roads. Okay, I think we need to read that again. Okay, the necessities of the body are allowed, but under rules and regs, and so we should not rely upon the control of such allowances. I think what he's talking about is also like with food. It's like you have to eat food to live, but if you start like you can do it too much where you live to eat instead of eating to live. I think that's what he means by relying upon the control of such allowances. Taking advantage, I guess. One has to follow those rules and regulations unattached to them. Yeah. That's the thing with rules that most of you people do not get. Rules are not holy. Any rule and regulation, it's a guide. There's very little real laws of the universe that are unbreakable. There's so few of them. You can break gravity. I've done that a bunch myself. Motorcycles, judo, I mean, those are the two I've done, but there's so many different ways you can start to bend the rules of gravity, or at least experience what it's like when gravity's getting weird. Sure, the scientists would say, actually, that's a G-force, which is still part of the blah, blah, blah. Who cares? I'm talking only about experience. Um, so yeah, even if you're following, perfect moderation in eating and only having sex in marriage and all that, um, you should do it because it's right and because you have a taste to do what's right, not because some guy told you to do it and you're just following the rules because following the rules is good and you're a good boy. That's especially bad now in our Kali Yuga situation because we have fake gurus and fake governments and fake religions and fake truth and all this stuff. So you can fall prey and succor to this stuff. And if you're in the habit of just being a good boy and following the rules of your master, and your master's a bad master, things are going to get bad, guaranteed. At the same time, you go to the other opposite direction, and you don't believe anyone, you can't follow anyone because you're too independent. Well, I mean, you will have some nice freedom there, but you'll be completely alone. And human beings typically do not like being completely alone. We are social animals. We like living in the city, as Aristotle would say. Um, he was not referring to modern cities with like 10 million people or whatever, but bigger than a village. But even a village is still a very social situation, but it's in the city where you get politics and government and these sorts of things, which are still um, quite attractive, and it allows for you know, a Varna system to emerge. Let's move on. Although they may be very carefully maintained, no one can guarantee that there will be no danger even on the safest road. That's true. The sense enjoyment spirit has been current a very long, long time, owing to material association. There's a passive voice. Not passive voice, but Prabhupada is being indirect here on purpose. Um, the sense enjoyment spirit has been current a long time. What is he talking about? Is he talking about being just an embodied being on this planet? Well, yeah, I mean, but that sense enjoyment spirit hasn't been around a long time. It's been around since the beginning of time. That's like part of the deal. So is he talking about some aspect of reality? No, I don't think so. He's talking about America. He's this a sentence here, I believe, is a nod to his experience with his first disciples coming to America, where all we know is sense enjoyment. That's the 200% reason to live. It's all there. And it's a very long, long time coming just from bad association since birth. And our parents too, since birth, and their parents perhaps too from birth. Very, very long time. Therefore, in spite of regulated sense enjoyment, there is every chance of falling down. Therefore, any attachment for regulated sense enjoyment must also be avoided by all means. This is what I've been trying to avoid by not getting serious about my diet and fitness. Is I'm scared I'll start getting attached and be like really good at it, and then be attached and then be more good at it, and then you just get lost. But action in the loving service of Krishna detaches one from all kinds of sensory activities. Therefore, no one should try to be detached from Krishna consciousness at any stage of life. The whole purpose of detachment from all kinds of sense attachment is ultimately to become situated on the platform of Krishna consciousness. That's true. I don't think Prabhupada really showed well how this is what I do when I write purports to my book too. This is a very authoritative. He just says the truth. But as far as delineating or arguing the reasons why attachment to the regulations is bad. I mean, I don't think he showed a single example of that or a single argument. He just kind of states it, and you know, oh no, there's the example that makes perfect sense. Is that you can even have an accident on the royal roads? Okay, so perfect example of this, Japan. This is the best example of a culture that's attached to rules and regulations. So with pedestrian traffic, they basically just follow the herd. They either follow exactly what the sign says, go or stop, or they follow the people next to them. So I was waiting at an intersection. The light said stop, do not walk, but there was no car in the sight, so I started walking. And then there was a lady next to me, a Japanese auntie, and as soon as I started walking, she instinctively put her leg out. Like there wasn't even a time to think. She just started walking right after I did, and then she caught herself in before the second step, and then she was scared. She was like, "What do I do?" Like normally I just follow everyone, it's okay, but the light says no, but the following is good. I do that too. And then I think the next moment after that, it turned green, and then everyone was walking behind me. Um, but yeah, if you because reality changes. So if you own and there's no rule, there's no panacea rule for every detail in reality. There are panacea universalist principles we can follow, like chant Hare Krishna and be happy, or love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, these are so utterly vague. That's why they work as a universal be all end all solution, because they're just so utterly vague. Um, but the rules and regulations, well, those are specific, and they're almost always so specific that you really can't get attached to them, because they are there to guide you. And if you can lose the forest for the trees by being attached to the rules, even if you're good at following the rules and getting all the benefits from that. If you're attached to the rules themselves, um, well, then you're under the control of the rules. And then but reality is not under that control. So reality will throw you a curveball, because that's what she can do. These rules and regulations, even coming from the Vedic injunctions, these are these come in time, place, and circumstance to benefit a certain people based on time, place, and circumstance. So, like we're already seeing now, that some things that Prabhupada said in the 60s and 70s, like we're not following that anymore. Um, Still, many people talk about the importance of Mangalarti, um, waking up early, and there's all the cleanliness rituals too, like showering after defecating. How many of us are doing all of those? How many grihastas are doing all of those? Um, and this is what we've seen in ISKCON, is people are too attached to the rules and have forgotten the principles. So the underlying principle here, if you read the Gita and not just follow along with what everyone else in ISKCON is doing, like the Japanese auntie, just following along, if you're actually reading this and studying, you'll know that a brahmachari living in a temple is in a very different position than a grihasta living at home. There are different rules and regulations for those two ashrams. There are different, it's just totally different. Um, like the overall tone and energy and peace in the household, that's so utterly important. Smiling at each other, those things are like super critical. Whereas if you wake up at 4 a.m., 4:30 a.m. instead of 4 a.m. and you're late to your own, Mongol Arati you're doing at your home altar or whatever, it's not a big deal. Like, it really doesn't matter. If you want to change it to 6 a.m., go for it. I mean, like, obviously you should try to follow those rules best you can, but you're a grihasta. So if your boss says, oh, I need you in at this time, and it contradicts the time of your puja or arati or whatever, it's like, what are you going to do? You either say, all right, well, I'm only going to do one, I'm never going to do the other. No, you're going to compromise. You're going to change the time of one so you can accommodate both. This is rationality. Living based off principles, not details, not rules and regulations. Because the rules and regulations serve the principles. The principles are superordinate to them. That's why this works. It's not like, it's just understanding. It's having a real understanding of how the structure is laid out. Okay, 335, one of my all-time favorites. It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though they may be faulty, than another's duties. Destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duties, for to follow another's path is dangerous. This is the strongest Dharma verse in the whole Gita, as far as I know. So not only does Krishna say, oh, follow your own nature and not someone else's nature. So this is piggybacking on 2 verses ago, 334. A man acts according to his own nature. Everyone follows their nature. So why are you going to try to repress and suppress anything, do any of this artificial renunciation? Well, so here Krishna is not only saying, yeah, people all follow their own nature and that's just natural. And yeah, you should do that. That's nice. He's saying you can destroy everything doing your own path. You can destroy your own life, those around you. If it's your duty and there's massive destruction from it, that's still better than simply engaging in another's duties, even doing those other duties perfectly. They're not your duties, so you don't get to do them. This is Dharma. You have your Dharma, they have their Dharma, and they have to be separate because we are separate living entities, and each living entity has its own svadharma. So that's the word Krishna uses here, svadharma, one's prescribed duties. Paradharma means from duties mentioned for others. Interesting. Oh, like paranormal, outside the normal. So that's one use of that word para. Typically means super, like above and beyond kind of, but para also just means outside of, from others in this case. Bhaya avaha, dangerous. To follow another's path is dangerous. That's another stronger way of saying what he already said before. 3 verses ago, Krishna said, basically, it's natural to follow your nature and it's unnatural to go against your nature. So, hey, man, just do what's natural. But here he's saying, following anyone else's path but yours is dangerous. It's not just unnatural, it's dangerous. You will get in trouble. Okay, here's his purport. One should therefore discharge his prescribed duties in full Krishna consciousness rather than those prescribed for others. Prescribed duties complement one's psychophysical condition under the spell of the modes of nature. Spiritual duties are as ordered by the spiritual master for the transcendental service of Krishna, but both materially or spiritually. One should stick to his prescribed duties even up to death rather than imitate another's prescribed duties. Duties on the spiritual platform and duties on the material platform may be different, but the principle of following the authorized direction is always good for the performer. But the principle, yeah, okay. When one is under the spell of the modes of nature, one should follow the prescribed rules for particular situations and should not imitate others. For example, a Brahman who is in the mode of goodness is non-violent, whereas a Kshatriya who is in the mode of passion is allowed to be violent. As such, for a Kshatriya, it is better to be vanquished following the rules of violence than to imitate a Brahman who follows the principles of nonviolence. Obviously, Prabhupada is for Arjuna. What the whole Bhagavad Gita is about is this very issue of Arjuna not understanding this one verse, 335. He's a Kshatriya. It's his duty and dharma to fight and engage in violence. Now he also has a saintly character, which is always good. But that saintly character and nice, tender, divine feelings are not appropriate when you're on a battlefield as a warrior. It's inappropriate. It's something you got to be a man about and repress, and that's real repression, because it's against dharma. Yeah, that's what the whole Gita is about. That exact example. Everyone has to cleanse his heart by a gradual process, not abruptly. However, when one transcends the modes of nature and is fully situated in Krishna consciousness, he can perform anything and everything under the direction of the bona fide spiritual master. In that complete stage of Krishna consciousness, the Kshatriya may act as a Brahmin, or a Brahmin act as a Kshatriya. In the transcendental stage, the distinctions of the material world do not apply. For example, Visvamitra was originally a Kshatriya, but later on he acted as a Brahmin, whereas Parasuram was a Brahmin, but later acted as a Kshatriya. Being transcendentally situated, they could do so, but as long as one is on the material platform, he must perform his duties according to the modes of nature. At the same time, he must have a full sense of Krishna consciousness. So many examples about this one verse from actually living in Asia for years, where people actually follow this verse. Chinese, Vietnamese, Japanese, and many of them never read the Gita, but they, by the glories of their ancestors, have realized this verse in their culture, and it's handed down and propagandized so well, they don't even know that they're doing it to themselves. They don't, like the parents and the teachers, they don't even know that they're actually giving this really good education by accident. Well, best example, I've said this before, this will eventually be an I Love Lucy rerun, but when I first moved to Thailand, I was, a teacher working. I was in the office and really stressed out. And, I liked having a coffee, a little instant Nescafe coffee. And I just needed, so I brought the coffee myself, but I needed the water cooler in the office to be full of water and turned on and heated up so I could have hot water. And a few times it wasn't like that. So I asked the guy who's in charge, and he very lazily took care of it after my classes, like after the time I needed my coffee, like it was too late. So the next time that happened, I noticed where they were storing the water cooler, the 5-gallon jugs. So I went down there, I picked it up, hauled it, put it on myself, set up. I had hot water. I was happy, but everyone in the office, including the other foreigner teacher next to me, because he'd been living in Thailand for years, they were so offended by it. They were so disturbed because I did someone else's duty. And it's a really obnoxious, uppity, insulting act, because what I was saying with my behavior is that this guy, the office manager, whose job it is to do it, I'm by doing his job for him, I'm telling him, you're bad at your job. You can't do this well enough, so I'm doing it for you, which is exactly what parents do to children. So it's condescending. Um, and not only that is does it have that personal kind of, harsh, insulting nature to it, but it's also it tears apart at the social fabric, because people start thinking to themselves like, oh well, if he can do someone else's duty and also his duty, well maybe I can do someone else's duty that I see them doing bad, and then, well, multiply that times infinity and you have modern American culture, where duty, just that word duty and honor, these words don't exist anymore, because we've degraded them out of existence. um like we have like, what's the word, like, we have the bottom line. It's like I follow just the bottom line so that I get my paycheck. The rest is whatever. That's what everyone's doing. That's what brahmacharis do in ISKCON temples here. That's what gas station attendants do, devotees, non-devotees, whatever. It's like, it's the cultural norm here. It's like you find your bottom line, however much money you need or happiness, whatever, and then um, you just get that, and then the rest is whatever, man. Who cares? That's not dharmic at all. That's monkey life. That's animal life. That's literally what animals do. When you put them in a cage or you bring them inside and domesticate them, and you want to, uh, and you're feeding them. You domesticate them, so you feed them, and then the animal's playing that game of, okay, what do I need to do to get fed the next time? Okay, well, I notice when I'm too cute, he like doesn't give me enough, or when I do this, he does. So they keep playing the game until you feed their bottom line. That's all they have, is just more food in their belly, and they just keep playing. They just keep dancing around until they get fed. This is what most humans are doing now, especially in cultures like America. It really is lower than Sudra because it's lower than human. It's subhuman. On that note, we're out of here. See y'all next week. Haribo.